Ethan sat at the dinner table with his sister, his fork idly tapping the rim of his plate as she spoke about her day. It was nothing unusual. She was always chatty, always filling the silence with anecdotes about work. But tonight, something snagged at the edges of his mind. She had just finished describing a conversation with her boss when she said, "You know, it's all part of the process." He frowned slightly. 10 minutes later, as she recounted something about her friend's new apartment, she ended with the same words, "It's all part of the process." And then, while clearing the dishes, she muttered it again under her breath, the exact same inflection, the same rhythm, like a line rehearsed. Ethan froze, fork still in hand. The phrase echoed in his head like static. Hadn't his best friend said that to him just last week? And his father before that? Always with that same hollow cadence. It's all part of the process. The following morning, Ethan couldn't shake it. The phrase clung to him like a stain. So when he met his coworker, Daniel, for coffee, he watched closely. Daniel was telling a story, something about the barista getting his order wrong when he paused to stir his drink. Ethan noticed the movement, a slow, deliberate circle of the spoon, clockwise exactly 6 times, then counterclockwise 6 times. The gesture was mechanical, almost ritualistic. Ethan's skin prickled. 2 nights ago, his sister had done the same thing at dinner, swirling her wine glass in 6 precise rotations before taking a sip. And last week, his father had tapped his knee 6 times, pause, 6 more, while watching TV. Daniel laughed suddenly, breaking Ethan's trance, and without thinking added, "You know, it's all part of the process." Ethan nearly dropped his coffee. The words hung in the air like a trap. That evening, Ethan visited his parents. He hadn't planned to, but the need to check gnawed at him. His mother greeted him at the door with her usual warmth, arms open, smile wide. Too wide. It held a strange stiffness, as though the muscles of her face had been arranged into the shape of joy without ever feeling it. The corners of her mouth didn't waver, not even when she blinked. They sat in the living room. His father asked about work, his voice steady, but his eyes didn't quite match the tone, blank, glassy, like someone had placed painted marbles in the sockets. Ethan found his gaze locked on his mother's smile. 10 minutes passed, and it hadn't changed. Not once. He cleared his throat. "Are you okay?" The smile faltered just slightly, then reset, snapping back into place like a rubber band pulled too far. His mother's voice was gentle, calm, too calm. "Of course, Ethan. It's all part of the process." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the words and smiles replaying in his mind. At around 2 a.m., he finally gave up and padded to the kitchen for a glass of water. The house was quiet, except for a faint sound coming from the living room. A low hum, like static muffled behind a wall. He stepped closer. His sister sat on the couch in the dark, her face illuminated only by the glow of the television screen. But the TV wasn't on any channel. It was just black, with faint white lines flickering across it. She was staring at it, unblinking, lips moving soundlessly. Ethan's breath caught. He leaned closer, just enough to hear her whispering. "Part of the process, part of the process." Suddenly, her body twitched, head jerking to the side in a sharp, unnatural motion, as though her neck had locked and reset. The hum ceased instantly. Her head turned toward him with perfect precision. Eyes wide, smile fixed. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. Ethan forced a laugh, mumbled something about insomnia, and retreated to his room. But his heart hammered with a single, undeniable truth. Something was wrong with them. The next day, he decided to test it. He met his best friend, Alex, for lunch. They sat across from each other at the diner, and Ethan waited until Alex was mid-sentence before cutting him off. "Hey, Alex, what's my middle name?" Alex froze. Not for long, just a fraction of a second, but long enough. His lips parted, eyes darting slightly, like a machine searching a corrupted file. Then he chuckled, shaking his head. "Man, you know I'm terrible with details. You're always teasing me about it." Ethan's blood ran cold. He had told Alex his middle name before, many times. Alex used to call him Ethan James as a joke. But the laugh, the way Alex had said it, it wasn't a failure of memory. It was a deflection. So Ethan pushed further. "What was the name of the place we went on my birthday? 2 years ago?" Another pause. Slight. Almost imperceptible. Then the same chuckle. "You and your tests," Alex said lightly. You always overthink things. Tests. Ethan never called it a test. Ethan left the diner shaken, but he couldn't stop himself. He lingered outside, watching through the window as Alex finished his meal. That's when he noticed it. At the table beside Alex sat a young couple. They weren't talking, weren't touching, just chewing. But their movements were perfectly in sync. Fork to mouth. Chew exactly 3 times, swallow, repeat. And then Alex, without even looking at them, matched their rhythm. Fork to mouth. 3 chews. Swallow. It was like watching marionettes pulled by invisible strings. Ethan's skin crawled. He turned away, but the reflection in the diner window caught his eye. Half a dozen patrons scattered across the room, all subtly mirroring each other's gestures. A scratch of the nose here, a sip of coffee there. Delayed by a beat, but in sequence. Like dancers following the same silent conductor. Ethan stumbled back from the glass, while rising in his throat. Inside, Alex looked up suddenly, directly at him, as though he'd been aware of Ethan's gaze the entire time. And he smiled. Too wide. That night, Ethan avoided his phone. He didn't want to hear from Alex, or his sister, or anyone else. But just past midnight, it rang anyway. His father's number. He almost let it go to voicemail, but dread pressed him to answer. Hello. A pause. Then, Ethan. Just checking in. The words were right, but the tone, something about the tone, wasn't. His father's voice had always been warm, deep, tinged with the gravel of age. But this, it was as if someone had recorded his voice and played it back through a cheap speaker. There was a faint metallic rasp beneath every syllable, like wires straining. Ethan tried to focus. Dad, can you say that again? Another pause. Then the exact same words. Not similar. Not paraphrased. Word for word. Same pacing, same cadence. Ethan, just checking in. His throat went dry. Dad, are you okay? The line crackled. Then came the same words a third time. Ethan, just checking in. The voice was smiling now. The next morning, Ethan bought a small digital recorder from the electronics store. He told himself it was for proof, something tangible, something he could play back later when the paranoia threatened to consume him. That evening, he brought it to his parents' house, tucked in his jacket pocket. Dinner was ordinary, almost too ordinary. His mother passed the bread. His father asked about work. His sister laughed at a joke that wasn't funny. And then, like clockwork, his father said it. You know, it's all part of the process. Ethan's pulse quickened. The recorder was running. Later that night, back in his apartment, he pressed play. The static-filled playback clicked on. His father's voice came through, tinny but clear. It's all part of the process. Ethan rewound. Played it again. It's all part of the process. Again. It's all part of the process. Each playback was different, slightly different inflection, slightly different timing. His memory told him it had been identical every time at the table, but the recorder disagreed. Then, on the 4th playback, the voice changed. Not his father's voice at all. Stop listening, Ethan. Ethan's hand froze on the recorder. The voice was low, distorted, and wrong. He rewound again, fingers trembling. This time, the playback was normal. His father's voice, nothing more. But the words stop listening. Ethan still echoed in his skull, heavy as lead. He barely slept, waking every hour with the sense of eyes on him. By morning, his apartment felt occupied. The stillness seemed staged, like a set left behind after filming. On his way to work, he caught sight of them. 3 people across the street, standing motionless at the bus stop. Not waiting, not fidgeting, not scrolling their phones. Just watching. Their heads turned in unison as Ethan walked past. At the office, Daniel waved him over cheerfully. Too cheerfully. Rough night? Daniel asked, eyes bright, smile frozen. Ethan forced a shrug. Fine. Just tired. Daniel tilted his head, studying him too long, like a bird examining prey. Then, casually, he said, it's all part of the process. 2 desks away, someone else repeated it. Same words. Same cadence. And another voice picked it up. And another. Until the whole office hummed with the phrase. It's all part of the process. It's all part of the process. Ethan staggered back from his desk, heart hammering, and realized. They knew. Ethan bolted from the office, ignoring the stairs that followed him down the hall. He didn't even wait for the elevator, just pounded down the stairwell 2 steps at a time until he burst onto the street. Fresh air hit his lungs, but it didn't help. The city felt wrong. Too quiet. The usual chaos of traffic seemed muted, slowed, like a simulation running at half speed. He ducked into a coffee shop, thinking the bustle might drown out his panic. But inside, the chatter stuttered and repeated like a scratched record. Lovely weather today. Weather today. Lovely weather. Each voice snagged on the same fragment before continuing. His chest tightened. He slipped out the back door into an alley, phone in hand, and dialed 911. The line clicked. Emergency services, what is your location? Relief flooded him. Yes, I need help. I think I'm being followed. But then the operator interrupted, voice eerily calm. Ethan, it's all part of the process. The call cut to static. The alley was suddenly silent, except for the faint echo of his own breath. And from the far end of the alley, 3 figures emerged. Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears. The 3 silhouettes at the end of the alley walked with deliberate slowness, their steps falling into the same rhythm, like one body split into thirds. He backed away, gripping his phone like a weapon. Stay back. The figures didn't respond. They just kept coming, their heads tilting in perfect unison. Ethan spun and bolted the other way, bursting onto the main street. He almost collided with a woman carrying groceries. Relief hit him like oxygen. Someone normal, someone human. But then the paper bag in her arms slipped, apples tumbling across the sidewalk. Ethan bent to help her gather them, and froze. Each apple rolled in straight, perfect lines, stopping at equal distances apart, as though obeying invisible rules. The woman smiled at him, her lips too stiff, and whispered, Careful, Ethan. You're not supposed to see. He dropped the apple and ran. Faces blurred past him on the street, smiling, watching, murmuring. Every voice he caught in passing seemed to fall into the same cadence. It's all part of the process. The city wasn't filled with strangers anymore. It was filled with them. Ethan ducked into a subway entrance, desperate to put distance between himself and the murmuring crowd. His hands shook as he pulled out his phone again. He had to try someone farther away, someone untouched. He scrolled until he found the number of an old college roommate, Chris, who'd moved across the country years ago. Someone he hadn't spoken to in ages. The line rang. Once. Twice. Ethan. Chris's voice came through, groggy but real. Man, it's been forever. Relief nearly dropped Ethan to his knees. Chris, thank God. Listen, I don't know how to explain this, but something's wrong. Everyone here, they're not right. Silence on the other end. Then Chris whispered, You saw it too? Ethan's throat tightened. You mean, it's happening there too? Another pause. Then the line distorted, crackling with static. Chris's voice came back, but lower, wrong, stretched. It's all part of the process. The train thundered into the station, screeching on its tracks. As it passed, Ethan caught sight of the windows. Every seat filled, every passenger staring straight at him. The roar of the train rattled his bones. Ethan stumbled back from the platform as the cars sped past, each window framing the same tableau. Rows of people sitting perfectly still, eyes fixed on him, faces blank. Not one blinked. Not one shifted. By the time the last car vanished into the tunnel, Ethan was gasping for air. His phone slipped from his hand, clattering to the concrete. He didn't bother picking it up. What good was it if every voice would twist into the same phrase? He staggered up the stairs, back to the city streets. Neon lights flickered above him, but even the signs seemed wrong. Letters repeating in patterns, words doubling back on themselves. Open 24 hours, 24 hours, 24 hours. A cold certainty slid into his mind like a knife. There was no one left. Every face, every voice, every gesture them. And if there were no humans left, then what did that make him? He pressed his palms against his temples, fighting the thought. He was still himself. He had to be. But then a darker thought surfaced, one he couldn't shake. What if that's exactly what they wanted him to believe? Ethan locked himself inside his apartment, every bolt and chain fastened. He paced the living room, muttering under his breath. I'm human. I'm human. I'm human. But the words felt flimsy, like reciting a spell he didn't believe. He needed proof. Something concrete. In the bathroom, he gripped the sink and stared into the mirror. His reflection stared back, tired eyes, stubble on his jaw, lips cracked from breathing too hard. But was that enough? His hand shook as he grabbed a razor blade from the drawer. If he bled, if the blood looked real, he could know. He pressed the blade to his arm and made a shallow cut. Red welled up, thick and metallic, dripping into the sink. He let out a shaky laugh. Relief, almost. Then he leaned closer. The droplets didn't spread the way they should. Instead, they slid together, merging into one perfectly round bead that clung to the porcelain. Ethan's breath caught. The bead twitched, and then it rolled uphill, back toward his wrist. Ethan stumbled back from the sink, clutching his arm. The bead of blood reached his skin and simply reabsorbed, vanishing as though it had never left. The cut sealed behind it, smooth and unbroken. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." He tore at his skin, scratching until it burned, desperate to leave a mark. But every abrasion closed the instant it appeared, like a page resetting itself after being written on. His reflection loomed in the mirror, too steady, too calm. It didn't flinch the way he did. Ethan lifted his hand slowly. So did the reflection, but half a second too late. His stomach dropped. The lights flickered overhead, and for the briefest instant, the reflection didn't match him at all. Its smile was already waiting. Ethan's chest seized as the reflection's grin widened, stretching past what a human face should allow. He staggered back, then lunged forward and smashed his fist into the glass. The mirror shattered into a spiderweb of shards, clattering into the sink. For a moment, relief surged, until he realized every shard still held the reflection. Dozens of tiny Ethans stared back at him. Only not him. Some shards showed his face still smiling, lips peeled back like a predator's snarl. Others blinked out of sync, movements jerky, mechanical. One shard turned its head a fraction to the side, studying him, even though Ethan himself hadn't moved. He swept his arm across the counter, sending the shards crashing to the floor, but even scattered across the tiles, the reflections kept twitching, some still grinning, some whispering silently with unmoving lips. Ethan pressed his back to the wall, trembling. His reflection hadn't been a reflection at all. It had been watching. Ethan couldn't stay. The apartment walls felt alive, breathing, pulsing with the same unseen rhythm that infected everything else. He shoved his coat on and bolted into the night. But the city was different. Buildings that had always been familiar, corner shops, offices, the laundromat, seemed taller now, their angles subtly warped, like they'd been rebuilt from memory, but not quite right. Windows stared like black eyes, each one following him as he ran. The streetlights flickered in sequence as he passed beneath them, blinking on and off like a coded signal. And the people, they weren't walking anymore. They were waiting. Dozens stood silently along the sidewalks, shoulders squared, faces turned toward him. None moved, none spoke. Until, as one, they smiled. A voice boomed across the empty avenue, but no mouth formed the words. "Return, Ethan. It's all part of the process." The phrase rippled through the crowd, whispered by 100 mouths in perfect unison. Ethan's legs gave way, but he forced himself forward. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to move before the city itself swallowed him whole. Ethan ran until his lungs felt raw, until the endless stairs blurred into a smear of faces behind him. He ducked into an old church at the edge of downtown, its heavy wooden doors groaning shut as he slammed them behind him. Inside, silence. No flickering lights, no murmured phrases, no synchronized gestures. Just the smell of dust and candle wax. The stained glass windows filtered the city's glow into fractured colors, and for the first time in days, Ethan felt a thread of relief. He stumbled to a pew and collapsed, head in his hands. "I'm not crazy," he whispered to himself. "I can't be." A voice answered softly. "You're not." Ethan's head snapped up. A man sat at the far end of the pew, hunched but human-looking, tired eyes, uneven stubble, hands trembling as though from exhaustion. Ethan's throat tightened. You see it too?" The man nodded slowly. "They can't enter here. Not yet. This place, it holds them back." For the first time, Ethan dared to believe he wasn't alone. But then the man smiled, too wide, too sudden, and whispered, "But soon, it's all part of the process." Ethan lurched backward from the pew, his body colliding with the cold stone floor. The man's grin didn't fade. It only sharpened, stretching until the skin at the corners of his mouth threatened to split. His trembling hands stilled, folding neatly together. "You almost believed it, didn't you?" the man said softly, voice reverberating in the cavernous church. That there was a place left untouched. Ethan scrambled toward the door, but it wouldn't budge. The wooden frame held firm, though he threw his shoulder against it again and again. The man rose slowly, each movement deliberate, puppet-like. There is no haven, Ethan. The places you run to, the faces you cling to, they are all part of the process. Candles along the altar sputtered out one by one, plunging the church into shadow. In the stained glass windows, the colors warped. Figures that had once been angels now stared down with wide, unblinking eyes. Their mouths had reshaped into the same frozen smile. The man's voice was closer now, though Ethan hadn't seen him move. You're not running from us anymore. You're running from yourself. Ethan stumbled backward until his spine pressed against the cold stone of the church wall. His chest heaved, every breath scraping like broken glass. The man stood at the center aisle now, though Ethan hadn't seen him cross the distance. His shadow stretched unnaturally long, curling along the pews like grasping fingers. What do you mean? Ethan's voice cracked. I'm not like you. The man tilted his head. Aren't you? You bleed as we do. You heal as we do. You speak the phrases without knowing you've spoken them. Ethan shook his head violently. No, I fight it. I've never said. But then he remembered. The night in his apartment, pacing the floor, whispering over and over, I'm human. I'm human. I'm human. And in between, faint and unbidden, a whisper he hadn't dared acknowledge. It's all part of the process. His knees buckled. No. The man's smile widened, but his eyes softened almost kindly. You're not surrounded, Ethan. You're awakening. The others were only here to guide you through the process. The church bell tolled above them, low and heavy. With each strike, Ethan felt something shift inside his chest. Something not human. The bell tolled again, rattling Ethan's skull. His body shuddered with each vibration, like the sound was tuning him to a frequency he couldn't resist. His hands twitched first, fingers locking, unlocking, then moving in smooth, mechanical patterns he didn't choose. He pressed them flat against the floor, and they tapped. 6 times, pause, 6 times. No, Ethan hissed, trying to wrench them still. This isn't me. But his mouth moved on its own, lips shaping the words before he could stop them. It's all part of the process. The voice wasn't his. It came from deep within him, layered and metallic, the sound of something wearing his throat like a mask. He tried to stand, to run, but his legs bent stiffly, rising in the same marionette rhythm he'd seen in the others. Each step forward wasn't a choice. It was a command carried out by muscles no longer his. The man watched serenely, as though observing a flower finally bloom. You see now, don't you? He said. The process isn't around you. It's inside you. It always has been. The bell tolled again, and Ethan smiled. The smile stretched across Ethan's face, but inside, his mind screamed. He clawed at the edges of his own will, searching for anything human left to hold on to. Fight it. Don't give in. Remember who you are. His jaw ached as he forced the grin to falter, muscles trembling under the weight of the command pulsing through him. His body twitched violently, caught between obedience and rebellion. The man tilted his head, almost amused. So much noise in you. Most surrender quietly. Why struggle when the process is inevitable? Ethan slammed his forehead into the nearest pew, pain exploding behind his eyes. The shock broke the rhythm for an instant. His hands stopped tapping, his lips stopped moving. Gasping, he spat blood onto the floor. Real blood this time, messy and uneven, spreading across the stone instead of coalescing into perfection. The man's expression flickered. Not anger, surprise. Ethan seized the moment. If it's inside me, he growled, then maybe I can tear it out. For the first time, the man took a step back. Ethan staggered to the altar, gripping the edge with bloodied hands. His skull rang with the bell's rhythm, but he forced himself to move, to act before it claimed him completely. On the altar lay a heavy iron crucifix, half-rusted, abandoned as ornament. He seized it, raising it above his head with a snarl. The man's voice echoed through the church, calm but strained now. You'll only destroy yourself. Good, Ethan spat. He slammed the crucifix down against his own chest. Pain erupted, white-hot, ripping through his ribs. His scream tore the air, raw, human, defiant. For a split second, something inside him tore loose. The air vibrated. The stained glass figures writhed, their smiles shattering into jagged cracks. Shadows rippled across the pews like insects scattering. And from Ethan's mouth spilled not blood, not breath, but a sound, metallic, shrill, a shriek that wasn't his own. The man flinched, covering his ears. Stop! Ethan drove the crucifix down again, harder. His body convulsed, vision flashing white, but the shrieking presence poured out of him, clawing at the air like smoke on fire. For the first time, Ethan felt it weaken. For the first time, they seemed afraid. Ethan collapsed to his knees, the crucifix clattering from his hand. His chest burned, ribs screaming with every breath, but the thing inside him, whatever it was, kept pouring out. The smoke-like mass writhed above him, shifting between shapes that made no sense. Limbs that bent backward, mouths without faces, eyes that blinked in clusters. It pulsed in time with the church bell, but weaker now, thinner. The man at the pew no longer smiled. His voice cracked with urgency. You fool! You were meant to carry it. To house it. Without you, it cannot survive. Ethan raised his head, trembling, blood smeared down his chin. Then let it die. The creature convulsed violently, shrieking, its form unraveling in the dim light. As it withered, Ethan felt an unbearable emptiness inside him, as though part of his very soul were being ripped out. And then he understood. It hadn't been something invading him. It had been woven into him from the beginning. The process wasn't about replacing humans. It was about cultivating them, growing vessels until the moment they were ready to be split open, releasing what they carried. He wasn't resisting the transformation. He was the transformation. The creature shriveled into smoke and scattered, vanishing into the rafters. Ethan collapsed forward, choking on air, his body suddenly light, hollow, like something vital had been scooped out. The church fell silent. The man stepped closer, no longer smiling. His expression was unreadable, almost reverent. You've done it, he whispered. You've completed the process. Ethan coughed, blood flecking his lips. I killed it. It's gone. The man knelt beside him, shaking his head slowly. Not gone. Freed. Do you think you were the only one carrying it? From outside the church came a sound like thunder. Ethan dragged himself to the broken window and looked out. The city skyline was alive with movement, columns of dark smoke rising from countless bodies, spiraling into the sky. From every home, every street, every tower, the same presence lifted free, uncoiling into the night like 1,000 black serpents. The bell tolled again. The man's voice was almost tender. You weren't surrounded by them, Ethan. You were surrounded by us. You've just opened the door. Ethan's hollow chest heaved as he stared at the sky, where the smoke converged into something vast, blotting out the stars. And somewhere deep inside his skull, though he was empty now, a familiar phrase echoed back, calm and final. It's all part of the process.